Hi, welcome to Give Cheese a Chance. I'm Marianne. I want to show you these papers. These are the scribblings and notes that I took over 30 years ago when my mother showed me how to make cheese for the very first time. I remember thinking back then, Mom, I don't really want to learn how to make cheese, but I did want to spend time with my mother. I loved her so much. Her name was Nadia, and we used to have such good times in the kitchen. So I said, okay, Mom, show me how to make cheese. This is the cheese that she taught me to make. We used to call it Arabic cheese in general, but it has a specific name. It's called Nabulsi cheese or Nablus cheese because it originates from the city of Nablus in Palestine. It actually goes by many different names. For example, other than Nabulsi and Arabic cheese, it's known just as white cheese or in Arabic jibne beda or jibne beladiyi. Nablus cheese is a traditional breakfast cheese served in many Arabic countries, including Palestine, Jordan, and Syria. As you can see, it's white and rectangular in shape. It's considered semi-hard, and it's stored in a very salty brine solution for very long-term storage. This cheese is similar to halloumi. If you like halloumi, you're probably going to like this because it has a similar texture and mild flavor. And you can eat it as is, plain like this, or you can pan fry it, where it has a nice golden brown crust and warm, gooey inside. So here are the ingredients we'll need for this cheese. First of all, you'll need 2 gallons or 8 liters of 3% homogenized cow's milk. Feel free to use sheep's milk or goat's milk if you have access to it, because that's the traditional milk that was used for this cheese and it tastes great. You'll also need 1 cup of salt. In this case, pickling or coarse salt is used. We're going to need some rennet. We're using half a tablet of rennet today. If you don't have access to rennet, you might have to order it online, and I do give links in the description below on where you can order it in Canada and the United States. And you'll notice that there's no bacterial culture here on this display, as there was when we did the episode number 3 for boursin-inspired cheese. And that's because this cheese gets its flavor from 2 delicate spices known as mahleb and mastika. So let's talk about mahleb first. Mahleb is also known as mahlepi, mahleb, mahlep, mahleb, but it may also be labeled as St. Lucie cherry kernels or ground cherry stones, because mahleb is made from the seeds of a species of cherry tree called the St. Lucie cherry tree. This is why mahleb's aroma and flavor is described as being cherry, almond, and rose-like. And it is because of this great aroma that this spice is used in Middle Eastern cookies and breads, but also this cheese. Ideally, you should buy mahleb seeds and grind them yourself for the best flavor, but I've found it very difficult to find mahleb seeds, so I always have to use the pre-ground version, so you might too. Now let's talk about mastika. It's also known as mastic, mastiha, mastiksa, mastic gum, Arabic gum, lentisco, lentisk, Yemen gum. I can't even say all those, but you get the idea. Mastika is a crystal resin that is produced from the sap of a tree that runs down the trunk and hardens. So it makes sense that mastika has an aromatic flavor that is best described as a mix between pine, cedar, and eucalyptus. This flavor has been used in cooking since ancient times. Now that we've gone over our ingredients, let's talk about the tools we'll need. We'll need a large pot for our cheese, a smaller pot to sterilize our fabric, a long knife to cut the curds, a long spoon to stir the curds, a digital thermometer to get the right temperature, some preserving jars, a strainer, a large measuring cup, and 2 heavy cutting boards. In addition, we're going to be using a large piece of fabric, this is butter muslin fabric, to strain our curds, and a small piece of cheesecloth to make a spice pouch. We're going to tie that spice pouch with a little bit of string, and we're going to tie our butter muslin cheese pouch with a bigger piece of string. So make sure you have all those tools before you start this recipe. And now that we've got everything we need, let's make our cheese. First, sterilize your fabric cloth by dropping it in some boiling water for 15 minutes and letting it cool. Next, add your milk to the pot and heat to 98 degrees Fahrenheit to 105 or 36 to 40 degrees Celsius on very low heat. It won't take long to reach this temperature, so keep an eye on it and stir occasionally. While waiting for the milk to heat up, put 1/2 of a rennet tablet into 1/2 cup of water and let it dissolve. Then fill your kitchen sink 1/3 full of water so that it is approximately the same temperature as our milk. When your milk has reached the target temperature, add your diluted rennet solution and stir for 2 minutes, then cover the pot. Take your pot and put it in the sink to sit undisturbed for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, take the lid off and check for a clean break. You want the milk to be congealed and to split into two when you put a knife in like this. If you don't get a clean break in 30 minutes, put the lid back on and check again in 10 more minutes. If you do get a clean break, cut the curds while in the sink in 3 directions like this. I've brought our pot back over to the stove and I'm turning the heat on very, very low. I'm going to be stirring the cubes with my slotted spoon for a 40-minute period. So every 5 minutes I'm going to come back and stir the cubes again. In the beginning when you stir, you might find some very large cubes, so just cut them up gently with your spoon. I use a very low-tech method of keeping track of my stirring, so I just cross off every circle that has passed for 5 minutes. That way I don't have to keep remembering. And of course I use my friend Siri or Alexa to do my 5-minute timings. You'll probably notice over the 40-minute period your temperature has gone up from what it was when we started to about 45 to 50 degrees Celsius. That's fine, but you don't want it to go too much higher than that. It's the end of the 40-minute period, and look how the curds have shrunk in size and all of the whey that has been produced by stirring for 40 minutes. I've lined my colander with my sterilized fabric and put it in the sink. I'm going to use my spoon or my measuring cup to scoop the curds into the colander. It's much faster with a larger measuring cup. Let this drain for 15 minutes. After the 15 minutes, pick up the edges of your fabric and create a knot, either with the fabric or with the string. And we're going to put this bag of cheese in between 2 cutting boards. Make sure you lay the knot on the side, like this. Find something like a spoon or a marker to lift up one end of the cutting board. This way, all of the whey will drain downwards into your sink. Then put your second cutting board on top, balance it very well, and put something heavy on top as well. Make sure this is stable. You do not want it to come crashing down in the middle of the night. Now let that sit for 8 hours or overnight to drain. It's now day 2 and I've already washed my jars and my lids and I'm ready to prepare my flavored brine. So to make the brine base, we need to add 1 full cup of coarse or pickling salt to a large pot. Then fill the pot with 8 cups of water. In this case, you can use chlorinated water. And give it a stir. You'll notice that there's a lot of salt on the bottom of the pot, but that's okay because we're going to be heating this brine and the salt will dissolve. The next thing we're going to do is to make a pouch full of our 2 spices. The first thing we're going to do is measure out 1 teaspoon of ground mahleb. And we're going to place it in the center of our small piece of cheesecloth. Next, we're going to prepare our mastika. Measure ½ a teaspoon of mastika. Put it into a bowl. We're going to give it 1 hard clunk, just to crush those crystals in half. We don't want to pulverize this. Then pour that spice also onto your cheesecloth square. We're going to get our little piece of string and tie up this spice pouch. You're going to take your spice pouch and add it directly to your salty brine and bring it over to your stove to heat it up to boiling. While we're waiting for our brine to boil, we're going to take a look at our cheese. That is a good solid block of cheese. We're going to cut it into cubes. You don't have to be exact with the size of your cubes. Some could be large and some could be small. Just play with it and have fun. Once the brine has come to a boil and all of the salt is dissolved, drop a few pieces of the cheese into the pot and let them boil for 5 minutes, turning once. Then lay them on a plate to cool. Repeat this process until all the cheese squares have been boiled for 5 minutes each. Let the cheese and the brine cool completely for 30 minutes. Now that my cheese and brine are fully cooled, I'm going to pack my cheese into the jars. Carefully scoop your brine and cover your cheese completely. And take your flavor pouch and put it into one of your jars. That will give that jar extra flavor. And seal them with your lids. These jars do not need to be processed in a water bath or specially sealed. It's because this method of preservation was developed prior to the invention of modern refrigerators. The cheese is preserved in such a high concentration of salt that microbes don't easily grow. And you will find many people today who keep their jars at room temperature for months because of this high salt concentration. But nowadays, I'd recommend that you store your jars of cheese in your fridge or basement cold room where they will last a year. In order to eat this cheese, it has to be desalted first. You can't eat it right out of the brine like you would a feta cheese. So how do we remove the excess salt? Take a few squares of cheese and soak them in very hot, even boiling water for an hour or more. Then change the water. Soak the cheese again. In fact, to speed up this desalting process, cut the squares of cheese into smaller pieces. Some people are smart and they do this step the night before in preparation for their breakfast, so when they wake up, they have cheese ready to eat. So we've finished making our Nabulsi cheese. We have 4 jars, 2 of which I'm going to keep for myself, and the other 2 I'm going to give away as gifts to friends. Remember, this will last in your fridge for a whole year, so you have a lot to eat. And I'm going to tell you how to eat this cheese. Many people eat it plain, like is shown here, and you can have it with grapes or watermelon as a snack, or you can have it as part of a traditional Palestinian breakfast with fried eggs, boiled eggs, olives, za'atar, extra virgin olive oil, and some tomatoes and cucumbers with pita or Arabic bread. It's just delicious and very satisfying. I also want to let you know that you can fry it in some butter, and that is a delicious treat. In Arabic, we say tfaddalu, which means help yourself. And then we say sahtain, which means to your health. It's our way to say to you, enjoy the meal with us. And I'm so glad that you joined us on Give Cheese a Chance. Please join us next time. And in the meantime, we'd love you to see these pictures that were sent to me by people who made and enjoyed their Nabulsi cheese. Tfaddalu and sahtain.